Très content et je pense que on va venir payer l'oignon là aussi.
My people, today we mark a turning point. With India, we signed a $1.2 billion tractor deal to modernize farming, boost food security, and create jobs. This is not just trade, it is sovereignty. With these tools, Burkina Faso will feed itself, empower its youth, and rise as West Africa's agricultural hub. Our soil is our strength, our future, our freedom.
The deal was sealed behind closed doors in New Delhi, but the shockwaves were felt across Africa. A $1.2 billion tractor mega deal between Burkina Faso and India. For some, it sounded impossible. How could one of Africa's poorest, landlocked countries pull off such a massive agreement? Yet for Ibrahim, the young captain who stunned the world by seizing power in 2022, this was more than a deal. It was a statement. A declaration that Burkina Faso would no longer play small in the global economy. It would fight to become Africa's agricultural investment hub. But how did tractors, of all things, become the symbol of ease, financial gamble, political strategy, and Africa's broader struggle for independence? To answer that, we have to look beyond shiny machines and dive into the money, the politics, and the risks that could either transform Burkina Faso or break it. And here is where things get even more interesting. This deal with India isn't just about farming. It's about shifting power between East and West, about finance flowing in new directions, and about whether one of Africa's youngest leaders can truly pull off what older ones only dreamed about. At the heart of the story is the deal itself. In early 2025, Burkina Faso announced that it had signed a $1.2 billion agreement with India for the import of over 100,000 tractors, modern irrigation systems, spare parts, and farmer training programs. Why tractors? Because in Burkina Faso, like much of the Sahel, 70% of the population depends on farming. But most still use hoes, oxen, and outdated tools. In financial terms, that's like running a country's economy on bicycles while everyone else is driving cars. Knew that if Burkina Faso was going to rise, it had to start in the soil. But here is the kicker. Burkina Faso doesn't have the money to casually drop $1 billion. The deal was structured through a mix of loans, grants, and public-private partnerships with Indian manufacturers. In short, India doesn't just sell tractors, it finances them. This makes the deal less about farming machines and more about creative financing on an international scale, and that's where the story opens a bigger loop. Why would India, a country 7,000 kilometers away, be willing to put so much on the line for Burkina Faso? The answer lies in a game of geopolitical investment that goes far beyond agriculture. India's interest isn't charity, it's strategy. For years, Africa has been a battleground for influence between China and the West. While China poured billions into roads, mines, and ports, India stayed quieter, focusing on soft investments like technology and medicine. But the tractor deal marks a shift by backing. India is buying into something more valuable than crops: political loyalty and market share. Burkina Faso sits in the heart of the Sahel, a region where France's influence has collapsed and new powers are rushing to fill the gap. For India, this is a chance to plant its flag literally on African soil, and the financial structure reflects that. Indian companies benefit by locking in long-term supply contracts, spare parts markets, and even future agricultural exports. In other words, this isn't just a sale, it's a portfolio investment disguised as tractors. But here's the twist: if India is playing the long game, is playing an even riskier short game. He's betting that the tractors will pay for themselves in higher food production, exports, and tax revenue. If that works, he'll look like a genius. If it doesn't, Burkina Faso could sink deeper into debt. Which brings us to the question: can tractors really transform a fragile economy into an agricultural powerhouse? Let's crunch the numbers. Burkina Faso produces about 2 million tons of maize, 1.2 million tons of sorghum, and 500,000 tons of rice each year. But yields are among the lowest in the world, often less than half of global averages. With modern tractors and irrigation, experts estimate yields could double or even triple within 5 years. That means Burkina Faso could feed not only itself but also export to neighbors like Ghana, Ivory Coast, and even North Africa. The financial logic is clear. If a tractor costs $12,000 and boosts production by $5,000 per year, Within 3 years it pays for itself. Multiply that across 100,000 tractors. And you're looking at billions in new revenue streams. But here's the hidden danger. Tractors don't run on hope. They need fuel, spare parts, trained mechanics, and farmers who know how to use them. Without that ecosystem, tractors can turn into expensive scrap metal, rusting in the fields, a sight already common in parts of Africa where past agricultural revolutions failed. So the question isn't just whether Burkina Faso can buy tractors, but whether it can manage them as assets, a challenge that takes us into the next layer. Politics, for Ibrahim. This deal is as much about political legitimacy as economics. Since coming to power, he has positioned himself as the leader who defied France, allied with Russia, and championed African independence. But talk is cheap. What people really want is results, jobs, food, and dignity. The tractor deal gives him something tangible. 2.2. He can stand in front of a shiny fleet of machines and say, "We are building the future." It's powerful political theater, but it's also dangerous, because if the tractors don't deliver, he risks looking like every other leader who made promises and failed. Here's where the loop opens wider. Isn't operating in isolation. He's part of the new alliance of Sahel states, CES, alongside Mali and Niger, who are also breaking ties with France and looking for new economic partners. If succeeds, the tractor deal could become a template for regional investment. If he fails, it could discourage future investors and leave the region more fragile than before. But this isn't just about Burkina Faso or even the Sahel. The tractor deal is plugged into a much bigger story: the global food crisis. Food is power. And in a world where climate change is hammering crops, supply chains are unstable, and populations are booming, whoever can grow food holds leverage. Burkina Faso may look small, but the Sahel has vast stretches of arable land. With the right investment, it could become a breadbasket for Africa. And that's where the stakes of gamble go global. India wants food security. Africa wants jobs. The Middle East wants stable suppliers. Even Europe, which once dismissed the Sahel, now watches nervously, realizing that hungry populations drive migration and instability. So this tractor deal isn't just about Burkina Faso's economy, it's about plugging into a global network of food politics and finance. If can position Burkina Faso as a reliable supplier, the money will keep flowing in. If not, the deal could collapse under its own weight. And yet, one more layer makes this story even more gripping: the symbolism of tractors themselves. Throughout history, machines have symbolized revolutions. Steam engines symbolized the industrial revolution. Computers symbolized the information age. In Burkina Faso, tractors are becoming the symbol of a financial independence revolution. For decades, African leaders have talked about breaking free from Western aid, but most ended up deeper in debt. Is trying something different. He is using foreign finance to build local capacity instead of importing food or weapons. It's a risky strategy, but it's also inspiring. The image of African farmers driving Indian-made tractors on once barren land is more than economic, it's psychological. It tells the people, we can do this ourselves. And that's why this deal matters far beyond Burkina Faso. If it works, it could ignite copycat projects across Africa, from Niger to Chad to Sudan. If it fails, it could reinforce the old narrative that Africa can't handle big investments, which leaves us with the big question: where does this story go from here? In the end, the $1.2 billion tractor mega deal is more than a contract. It's a test of EU's leadership, a test of India's ambitions in Africa. A test of whether global finance can be harnessed for real transformation or whether it will just create another cycle of debt and disappointment. Tractors alone won't make Burkina Faso the agricultural hub of Africa, but as symbols, as tools, and as financial assets, they mark the beginning of something new, for better or worse. Has put his country on the map not as a victim of history, but as a player in the global investment game. And that may be the most important harvest of all.